Our next lesson focuses on money and problem solving. So let's go ahead and take a look at some coins and how those coins relate to our decimals and fractions. All right, so we have a penny, and a penny is worth 1/100th of a dollar. So we would write it as 1/100th as a decimal and 1/100th as a fraction. Our nickel is worth 5/100ths of a dollar. So there are the two different ways we would write the value for our nickel. And then a dime is worth 10/100ths of a dollar. And notice there are three different ways that we can write a dime. We have 10/100ths in a decimal. We could also write it as 1/10. So we'd have four ways. We have 10/100ths, or we know that there are 10 hundreds and 100. So we could rewrite this as 1/10 or 1/10 as a decimal. And then our quarter is worth 25 cents. So we would write it as 25/100ths or 25/100. All right. The next thing I want you to do is look at this table, and I want you to fill it out for me. What goes in these blanks? We're going to look at the first one together. So the first thing we do is we look at the amount, and the amount shows me 3/100ths in my dollar, 3/100ths of a dollar, excuse me. So what coins could I have to make 3/100ths of a dollar? If I had 3 pennies, that would be 3/100ths of a dollar. So I would write 3 pennies in my first column. Then it says write it as a fraction or a mixed number. So this would be 3/100ths, and then as my decimal, I would have 3/100ths. Notice we have three different ways we're writing this. We have our money amount, we have our fraction, and then we have our decimal. Go ahead and do our next one. We have 25/100ths. What coin would be associated with 25/100ths? And then go ahead and write it as a decimal. The coin that would be associated with this would be 1/4. And then our decimal equivalent would look exactly like our money amount except without the money sign. So we would have 25/100ths. How much is 2 quarters and 1 dime? Give me your money amount. And when we write our money amount, all we do is have our money sign and then the decimal. And the decimal is going to be identical except without the money sign. So what is 2 quarters and 1 dime equivalent to? That's equivalent to 60 cents. And then when I write it as a decimal, I would have 60/100ths. And then the last one is 2 $1 bills and 5 nickels. What is that equivalent to? In terms of money, 2 $1 bills would be $2, and then 5 nickels would make 25 cents. And then I'm going to write this as a fraction or a mixed number. So because there's a whole number in my ones place, it's going to be a mixed number. So I would have 2 and 25/100ths. And then when I'm writing it as a decimal, it's going to look exactly the same as my money amount without my money sign. So I would have 2 and 25/100ths. All right, and that's filling out our table. All right, for these next few problems, we're going to write the total money amount. So we're going to write it as that decimal with that money sign, and then we're going to rewrite it as a fraction and a decimal. So let's look at the first one together. When we look at these, it's often easiest if we identify how much each section is, and then we add them together. So for example, we have 3 quarters over here, and each of these quarters is worth 25 cents. And so if I add 25 plus 25 plus 25, my quarters give me a total of 75 cents. I then go over to my pennies, and I have 4 cents in pennies. And then when I look at my dimes, I have 30 cents. So what might be helpful is if we add up the bigger amounts first. So 30 plus 75, that gives me 105 cents, and then I add 4 more, so I have 109 cents. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write that first as money amount. So I'm going to have my money sign, and then I'm going to write this as $1 because there's 100 cents in a dollar, and I said this was 109 cents. So 109 is $1.09. Now my next step is to write this as a mixed number or a fraction. So I have 1 9/100ths. And then my final step is to write this as a decimal. And again, that's identical to my money amount, except without the money sign. So I have 1 9/100ths. Go ahead and give the next one a try. Figure out how much money is on display, and then write it 3 ways. When we're figuring out how much money is here, we need to identify each of these coins. So here's my quarter, that's worth 25 cents. Each of my dimes is worth 10 cents, and then each of my nickels is worth 5 cents. This way I can add things up. It's sometimes easier if I'm dealing with numbers with a 0. So I might start by adding 25 plus 5 more, that gives me 30, 30, 40, 50, 55, 60. So I have 60 cents here. You might have added them a different way, and that's fine. We're going to write it 3 different ways. So I have 60 cents, so I'm going to write 60 cents. Then I'm going to write, here's my 60 cents. Then I'm going to write it as a fraction, so I have 60 hundredths. And then I'm going to write it as a decimal, so I have 60 hundredths. I got 2 more of these for you to do. Go ahead and look at this next one. How much money is shown over here on the right? Add all that up, and then write it as a money amount, a fraction, and a decimal. If we add all this up, these are all dimes, so I have 6 of them, so that's 60 cents, and then I have 4 pennies. So when I add those together, I get 64 cents. If I write that as a fraction, I have 64 hundredths. And when I write that as a decimal, I have 64 hundredths. And then the last one of these, go ahead and add all this money amount up. What do you get? Well, my dollar is worth 100 cents. Then I have 3 dimes that are worth 30 cents. I have 3 nickels that are worth 15 cents, and I have 1 penny. When I add all of these up, I have 146 cents. That means I have 146 cents, or $1.46. If I rewrite this as a mixed number, I have 1 and 46 hundredths. And then as a decimal, I have 1 and 46 hundredths. And those are my amounts. All right, the next thing that we're going to do is I want you to take these fractions or mixed numbers and write them as decimals. So this should be pretty quick. All right, I have 15 hundredths, so I'm going to write that as 15 hundredths. 2 and 9 hundredths is going to be 2. And remember, my 9 needs to be in my hundredths place, so I need a 0 in my tenths place. 49 hundredths is going to be 49 hundredths. And then I have 4 and 51 hundredths, so 4 and 51 hundredths. Finally, we're going to take a look at some word problems. Now, when we do these word problems, it might help if you draw a picture. It might help if you do some division. A picture can help us by drawing out some money amounts and then separating them. So, together, Heidi and Mia have $1.20. They want to share the money equally. How much money will each girl get? Go ahead and solve this problem. They're sharing $1.20 evenly. $1.20 is really just 120 cents. So I can take 120 cents and I can divide it by 2 girls, because there are 2 girls here. If I did that and I took my 2 and I had my 120 and I divided, 2 goes into 12 6 times, 2 times 6 is 12. I subtract, I'm left with 0. I bring down my 0 and 2 goes into 0 times. I'm left with 60 cents. So each girl would get 60 cents. Another way to do this would be to draw this out. So what is $1.20 made out of? Well, there are 4 quarters. And then there are 2 dimes. Again, there are other ways that we can make $1.20, but this is just one way. And then if I separate this by 2, I can add all that up. 2 quarters gives me 50 cents plus 1 dime gives me 60 cents. So how much money will each girl get? 60 cents. Our next problem says that Dax, Cody, and Graydon each have 60 cents. How much money do they have all together? So each of them have 60 cents. How much money is that all together? For this, all we need to do is some addition, or we can do multiplication. So we have 63 times. That's the same as 60 times 3. When I add these up, I get 180. If I multiply this, I'm also going to get 180. That gives me 180 cents. I then need to rewrite this as a decimal. Well, there are 100 cents in a dollar, so my decimal point would go right there after two place values were right there. So how much money do they have all together? They have $1.80 or 180 cents. And final problem. Kylie saves $13 each week to buy a new toy. In how many weeks will she have saved at least $100? Think about this problem. What can you do to solve it? And go ahead and solve this problem. All right, there are a few things that you can do to solve this problem. We could do some division, but that's some pretty big division that we're going to have to do. So another option would be to do some repeated addition to see how many weeks. Or we could do some guess and check with multiplication. That's totally up to you. Maybe you did repeated addition, so we'd have 13, and we need to see, we want to save at least $100, so we need to go to at least 100. 13 plus 13, that gives me 26. Maybe if I add another 13 plus 13, that gives me another 26. If I add those together, I'm left with 52. So maybe I add another 13 plus 13, that gives me another 26. If I add 52 plus 26, that gives me 78. That's still not enough. So if I add another 13 to 78, that still doesn't give me enough because that only gives me 91. So I need to add another 13. If I add another 13, that'd give me another 26. Now I'm going to add all of these together. This gave me 52. This gave me 52. And then I add these together and I have 104, which is exactly around what I need because I need to save at least $100. Now for me to figure out how many weeks that is, I'm going to add all of these up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks. Again, another way that you could do this would be to guess and check. 13 times what is going to get you at least 100, but remember we need to get it really close, or you could have done some division if that was more your thing. Regardless, you would have still gotten, it's going to take her around 8 weeks in order to save up for her toy, which is about $100. All right, that's our lesson for today. We were identifying how much different coins were worth, and then counting up some money and rewriting it as decimals and mixed numbers or fractions, and then we were solving some word problems with money. See you tomorrow.